Okay, so I'm gonna be playing more Skyrim. Talk to the Oh no. No! So much better. I can't stand that. Oh fuck. No! I don't want to hurt any animals. We're detected by what? I'm gonna do my best not to have to hurt any of those wolves. Can we jump? Let me jump. Okay. According to my boyfriend, there is a spell that allows you to not have to kill any animals because it makes them like your friends or something. I'm gonna try and get my hands on that. That. Whatever that is, I don't want to be anywhere near it. Such a gorgeous game. Ooh. Wish there was a zoom button or binoculars. Battleborn Farm discovered. Salmon. 12 high. Okay. Vernikissen by Taffy Dromio. Okay. Halgerd walked into the king's King's huh? King's hand that lured us evening. His face clouded with sadness. While he ordered a mug of grief, his mates Garax and Jomra joined him with moderately sincere concern. What's wrong with you, Halgerd? Asked Jomra. You're later than usual, and there's a certain air of tragedy you've dragged in with you. Have you lost money, or nearest and dearest? I haven't lost any money, Halgerd grimaced, but I've just received word from my nephew that my cousin Eliok has died. Perfectly natural, he says. Just old age. Eliok was 10 years younger than me. Oh, that's terrible, but it goes to show that it's important to savor all of life's possibilities, 'cause you never know when your time is coming, said Garaz, who had been sitting at the same stool at the Smoky Corner Club for the last several hours. He was not one cursed with self-awareness. Life's short, all right, agreed Giomara, but you'll pardon a sentimental thought. Few of us are aware of the influence we'll have after our deaths. Perhaps there's some comfort there. For example, have I told you the story of Vernicus and Borlaug? I don't believe so, said Halgerd. Vernicus was a Daedra, said Jomra, throwing a few dribbles on Flynn on the hearth to cast the proper mood. Throwing through dribbles? Oh, whatever. And though our tale took place many, many years ago, it would be stated that Vernicus still is one. For what after all is time to the immortal Daedra? Actually, Garaz interrupted, I understand that the notion of immortality. I'm trying to offer one friend an inspirational tale in his hour of need. Jomara growled. I don't have all bloody night to tell it, if you don't mind. You wouldn't have heard of Vernicus, said Jomara, abandoning the theme of immortality for the time being. For even at the height of his power and fame, he was considered feeble by the admittedly high standards of the day. Of course, this lack of respect infuriated him, and his reaction was typical for lesser Daedra. He went on a murderous rampage. Ow. Soon word spread through all the villages in the Colovian west of the unholy terror. Whole families had been butchered, castles destroyed, orchards and fields torched, and cursed so nothing would ever grow there again. To make things even worse for the villagers, Vernicus began getting visitations from an old rival of his from Oblivion. She was a Daedra, seducer named Horophotha, and she delighted in taunting him to see how angry he would become. You've flooded a village that's supposed to be impressive, she would sneer. Try collapsing a continent, and maybe you'll get a little attention. Vernicus would become pretty angry. He didn't come very close to collapsing the continent of Tamriel, but it wasn't for a lack of trying. A hero was needed to face the mad Daedra, and fortunately one was available. His name was Borlaug, and it was said that he had been blessed by the goddess Phrynerith. That was the only explanation for his inhuman accuracy with his bow and arrow, for he never missed a target. As a child, he had driven his marksmanship tutors wild with frustration. They would tell him how to plant his feet, bow to knock a bolt, the proper grip for the cord, and the best method for the release. He ignored all of the rules, and somehow, every time, the arrow would catch a breath of wind and sail directly to his target. It did not matter if the quarry was moving or still, at very close range or miles away. This sounds like a weird mix of a bit of the Iliad, but mostly reminds me a bit of Gilgamesh with there's an angry warrior and someone's got to confront it. Whatever he wanted to strike with his arrow would be stuck. Borlaug answered the call when one of the village mayors begged him for help. Unfortunately, he was not as great a horseman as he was an archer. As he rolled through the forest towards the mayor's town, a place called Evensicon, Vernicus was already murdering everyone there. Horophotha watched and stifled back a yawn. Murdering a small town mayor isn't going to put you in famous company, you know. What you need is a great champion to defeat. Someone like Viscramo or Delineal Whitestrake, or she stared at the figure emerging from the forest. That fellow! Who's he? Growled Vernicus between bites of the mayor's quivering body. The greatest archer in Tamriel, he never missed. Borla had his bow strung and was pointing it at Daedra. For a moment, Vernicus felt like laughing. The fellow was not even aiming straight, but he had a well-honed sense of self-preservation. There was something about the man's lack of confidence that convinced the Daedra that Haravada wasn't lying. As the ball left the bow, Vernicus vanished in a sheet of flame. The arrow impaled a tree. Borlaug stood instead. He had missed a target. In oblivion, Vernicus ranged, fleeing before a mortal man like that. Not even the basest scamp would have been so craven. He had exposed himself for the weak, cowardly creature he was. As he considered what steps to take to salvage the situation, he found himself face to knee with the most fearsome of Daedra princes, Molag Bal. I never thought anything much of you, Vernicus, the giant boomed. But you have more than proven your worth. You have shown the creatures of Mundus that the Daedra are more powerful than the blessings of the gods. The other denizens of Oblivion quickly agreed, with the view of Molag Bal. The Daedra are, after all, always very sensitive about their various defeats at the hands of mortal champions. Vernicus was proclaimed the elusive beast, the unpursuable one, he who cannot be touched, the bane of Varnath. Shrines devoted to him began to be built in remote corners of Morrow and in Skyrim. Borlor, meanwhile, now found flawed, was never again called to rescue a village. He was so heartbroken over his failure to strike his target that he became a hermit and never restrung his bow again. Some months later he died, unmourned and unremembered. Is this really the tale you thought that would cheer me? Asked Halgerd incredulously. I heard the King of Worms told more inspirational tales. Wait, smiled Genre, I'm not finished yet. For a year's time, Vernicus was content to watch his legend grow, and his fledgling worship spread from his home in Oblivion. He was, in addition to being cowardly and inclined towards murderous rages, also a very lazy creature. His worshippers told tales of their master avoiding the bolts of 1,000 archers, of moving through oceans without getting wet, and other feats of avoidance that would rather not that he would rather not have to demonstrate in person. The real story of his ignominious retreat from Bola was thankfully forgotten. The bad news, when it came, was delivered to him for some relish from Horofatha. He had delighted in her jealousy as his growing reputation. So it was with a cruel smile she told him, Your shrines are being assaulted. Who dares? He roared. Everyone who passes them in the wilderness feels the need to throw a stone. Horofatha purred. How do I go back? Whoop, 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 whoop. You can hardly blame them. After all, they represent he who cannot be touched. How could anyone be expected to resist such a target? Vernicus peered through the veil into the world of Mundus and saw that it was true. One of his shrines in the Colovian West Country was, I know about Colovia because of memes, was surrounded, Colovian coffee memes, West Country was surrounded by a large platoon of mercenary soldiers, who delighted in pelting it with rocks. His worshippers huddled inside, praying for a miracle. In an instant, he appeared before the mercenaries, and his range was terrifying to behold. They fled into the woods before he even had a chance to murder one of them. His worshippers threw open the wooden door to the shrine and dropped to their knees in joy and fear. His anger melted. Then a stone struck him. Then another. He turned to face his assailants, but the air was suddenly filled with rocks. Vernicus could not see them, but he heard mercenaries in the woods laugh. It's not even trying to move out of the way. It's impossible not to hit him. With a roar of humiliation, the Daedra bounded into the shrine, chased by the onslaught. One of the stones knocked the door closed behind him, striking him in the back. His face broke, anger and embarrassment disappearing, replaced by pain. He turned, shaking, to his worshippers who had huddled in the shadows of the shrine, their faith shattered. "Where did you get the wood to build this shrine?" Vernicus groaned. "Mostly from a copse of trees near the village of Evensicon," his high priest. Oh, I think I know where this is going. I think the bow that Borlo was using was made from the same trees. Vernicus nodded. He dropped forward, revealing the deep wound in his back. A rusted arrowhead buried in the wall in the wood had jolted loose in the assault and impaled him. The Daedra vanished in a whirlwind of dust. The shrines were abandoned shortly thereafter, though Vernicus did have a brief resurgence as the patron spirit of limitations and impotence before fading from memory altogether. The legend of Borlo himself never became very well known either, but there are still some who tell the tale, like myself, and the advantage of knowing that what the great archer himself didn't know on his deathbed. His final arrow found its target after all. Ooh. I actually quite like that. Oh, you know what? We're going to do some reading today. So strap in. I'm going to drink a little water. I was told that one of the most enjoyable things to do in Skyrim is to read the stories. And that story was actually quite funny. I actually quite enjoyed it in the end. Okay, gods in worship. Oh! Don't mind me, I'm just reading your wonderful literature here. Okay. What should we do next? Brief history of the Empire. Oh, Yingol and the Sea Ghosts. Alright, what we'll do is we'll spend today reading. Let's read some The Real Baronsia, Volume 1. Myths of Sheogorath. Alright, we're gonna read this. Myths of Sheogorath by Mimophonus. Sheogorath invents me. Oh, I like this. Sheogorath invents music. In the earliest of days, in a time when the world was still raw, Sheogorath decided to walk amongst the mortals. He donned his guise of gentleman with a cane, and moved from place to place without being recognized. After 11 days and 11 nights, Sheogorath decided that life among mortals was even more boring than his otherworldly existence. "What can I do to make their lives more interesting?" he said to himself. At that same moment, a young woman nearby commented wistfully to herself. It's a bit hard to read the font here. "The sounds of the birds are so beautiful." Sheogorath silently agreed with her. Mortals could not make the beautiful and inspired calls of birds. Mortals could not make the beautiful and inspired calls of birds. Their voices were wretched and mundane. He would not change the nature of the mortals, for that was the purview of other Daedric princes. However, he could give them tools to make beautiful sounds. Sheogorath took hold of the petulant woman and ripped her asunder. From her tendons he made lutes. From her skull and arm bones he made a drum. From her bones he made flutes. He presented those gifts to the mortals, and thus music was born. God, the music is all talking about music. As someone who likes ambient music quite a bit, I quite enjoyed the background music in this. Sheogorath and King Leander. King Leander was known to be an exceptionally rational man. He lived in a palace that was a small, simple structure, unadorned with art and ugly to look upon. "I do not need more than this," he would say. "Why spend gold on such luxuries when I can spend it on my armies or great public works?" His kingdom prospered under his sensible rule. However, the people did not always share the king's sense of practicality. They would build houses that were beautiful to look upon, though not necessarily very practical. They devoted time and energy to the works of art. They would celebrate events with lavish festivals. In general, they were quite happy. This guy sounds nice, you know. King Leander was disappointed that more of them did not follow his example and lead frugal, sensible lives. He brooded on this for many years. Finally, he decided that his subjects simply didn't understand how much more they could accomplish if they didn't waste time on those frivolous activities. Perhaps, he reasoned, they just needed more examples. The king decreed that all new buildings must be simple, unadorned, and no larger than was necessary for their function. The people were not happy about this, but they liked their king and respected the new law. In a few short years, there were more plain buildings than ornate ones. The citizens used the money saved to make and buy even more lavish art and hold even more excessive celebrations. Once again, King Leander decided to provide them a strict example of how beneficial it would be to use their time and resources for more practical purposes. He banned all works of art in the city. Okay, this guy doesn't sound that nice. The people were quite put out by this, but they knew that their king was doing what he thought was best for them. However, human nature is not so easily denied. In a few more years, the city was filled with plain, simple buildings and devoid of any sort of art. However, the people had even more money and time to devote to their parties and festivals. With a heavy heart, King Leander decided that his people were to be treated like children, and like all children, they needed rules and discipline laid down by great figures of authority to make them understand what was truly important in life. He decreed that there should be no revelry in the city. Singing, dancing, and music were all banned. Even food and drink were limited to water and simple foodstuffs. The people had had enough. Revolt was out of question, since King Leander had a very well-trained and equipped army. They visited the shrines and temples in the droves, praying to all the gods, and even to some of the Daedric princes, that King Leander would revoke these new oppressive laws. Sheogorath heard their new pleas and decided to visit King Leander. He appeared to the king in his dreams as a field of flowers, each with arms instead of petals, and the face of the mad god in the center. I am Lord of the creative and Lord of the deranged. Oh, this is like a Dionysus style figure. Since you have no use for my gifts of creativity, I have decided to bless you with the abundance of my other gift. Oh, from that day forward, every child born in the city was born into madness. Since infants do not reveal illness in the mind, it was several years before this was realized. The king's own son was among the victims, suffering from seizures and delusions. Yet King Leander refused to change his ways. When his son, Glint, was 12 years old, he stabbed his father while Leander was sleeping. With his dying breath, Leander asked, "Why?" His son replied, "It is the most practical thing I could do." The new young king ordered all the palace servants slaughtered. He ordered a grand festival to celebrate his new reign and the repeal of Leander's laws. He served the crowds a stew made from the carcasses of the palace servants. He ordered the east-facing walls and every building painted red, and the facing walls painted in the stripes. He decreed that all citizens wear ornate masks on the backs of their heads. He then burned down the palace and began construction of a new one. In the new palace, the young king ordered his personal chambers to not have any doors, for fear that small woodland creatures would attack him. He ordered that it would have no windows, for fear that the sun and moon were jealous of him and plotting his death, and thus ended the line of King Leander. The people of the city returned to the grand works of art and raucous celebrations. They talked and acted as if they still had a living king, and even kept up the palace, using it to house and care for their mad children. Sheogorath was mightily pleased with this outcome. From that day forward, the city was blessed with more than the normal number of gifted artists and deranged citizens. Alright, I want to read more of these, but I do got to check something very quickly. I've got to check if I've actually got space on my PC for recording all of this stuff. So Because whenever it records onto my C drive and not my D drive. But it looks like we've got more time for story time, more space for story time, so here we go. I think that I am going to read more Myths of Sheogorath later. Still.
That isn't yours.
I'm borrowing it. It's got nice stories. Okay, what I'm thinking of doing is we're gonna read about the Empire. Brief History of the Empire, Volume 1.
You're not supposed to be in here.
I'm just reading your stories. It just doesn't seem to be doing much. Just the concept, just some weird cat wandering into a house. Okay, we're gonna read some more of the brief history of the Empire. Okay. I've got to make sure, I'm a little worried that good. I have a hair straightener that won't turn off if I turn it off, so I've got to unplug it. I'm not sure how that happened, but before the rule of Tiber Septim, all of Tamriel was in chaos. The poet Trachesis called that period of continuous unrest days and nights of blood and venom. The kings were a pretty lot of grasping tyrants who fought Tiber's attempts to bring order to the land, but they were as disorganized as they were dissolute, and the strong hand of Septim brought peace forcibly to Tamriel. The year was Second Era, 896. The following year, the emperor declared the beginning of a new era. Thus began the Third Era, Year Ort. Interesting. Year Ort, so year 0. Alright, so yeah, I was right, it's Second Era. For 38 years, Emperor Tiber reigned supreme. It was a lawful, pious, and glorious age when justice was known to one and all, from serf to sovereign. On Tiber's death, it reigned for an entire fortnight, as if the land of Tamriel itself was weeping. The emperor's grandson, Pelagius, came to the throne. Though his reign was short, he was as strong and resolute as his father had been, and Tamriel could have enjoyed a continuation of the Golden Age. Alas, an unknown enemy of the Septim family hired that accursed organization of cutthroats, the Dark Brotherhood, to kill... I've heard that before. To kill the Emperor Delagius as... Is it Pelagius or Delagius? I think it's Delagius. Delagius the First, as he knelt at prayer at the temple of the One in the imperial city. Delagius I's reign lasted less than 3 years. Delagius had no living children, so the crown imperial passed to his first cousin, the daughter of Tiber's brother Agnereth. Kintira, former queen of Silvana, assumed the throne of Kintira I. Her reign was blessed with prosperity and good harvest, and she was herself an avid patroness of art, music, and dance, a Minervian figure. Kintira's son was crowned after her death. The first emperor of Tamriel was to use the imperial name Uriel. Uriel was the great lawmaker of the Septim dynasty and a promoter of independent organizations and guild. Under his kind but firm hand, the Fighters Guild and the Mages Guild increased in prominence throughout Tamriel. His son and successor Uriel II reigned for 18 years. From the death of Uriel I in 3rd Era 64 to Delagius II's ascension in 3rd Era 82. Tragically, the rule of Uriel II was cursed with blights, plagues, and insurrections. The tenderness he inherited from his father did not serve Tamriel well, and little justice was done. Delagius II inherited not only the throne from his father, but the debt from the latter's poor financial and judicial management. Delagius dismissed all of the elder council and allowed only those willing to pay great sums to resume their seats. Is it really that bad to have people pay to be congressmen or senators? Well, actually, it is, because that would just encourage rich people. I'm not going to get political. He encouraged similar acts among his vassals. The kings of... Actually, one more comment on that. It's far better we have wages, because that means poor and, less and more people from various walks of life can serve in a public seat. But enough about that. No need to discuss that. This is just making me think. The kings of Tamriel, and by the end of his 17-year reign, Tamriel had returned to prosperity. His critics, however, had suggested that any advisor possessed of wisdom, but not of gold, had been summarily ousted by Delagius. This may have led to some of the troubles with his son Antiochus faced when he in turn became emperor. Antiochus was certainly one of the more flamboyant members of the usually austere Septim family. He had numerous mistresses and nearly as many wives, and was renowned for the grandeur of his dress and high good humour. Unfortunately, his reign was rife with civil war, surpassing even that of his grandfather Uriel II. The War of the Isle in 3rd Era 110, 12 years after Antiochus assumed the throne, nearly took the province of Somerset Isle away from Tamriel. The united alliance of the kings of Somerset and Antiochus only managed to defeat King Orgbum of the island kingdom of Dyandonia due to a freak storm. Legend credits the Desigic Order of the Isle of Artium with the sorcery behind the Tempest. Okay. The story of Kintira II, heiress to their father Antiochus' throne, is certainly one of the saddest tales in imperial history. Her first cousin Uriel, son of Queen Dodoma of Solitude, accused Kintira of being a bastard, alluding to the infamous decadence of the imperial city during her father's reign. Well, Antiochus really did a number on their reputation. When his accusation failed to stop her coronation, Uriel brought the support of several disgruntled kings of High Rock, Skyrim, Morrowind, and the Queen of Dodoma's assistance. He coordinated 3 attacks on the Septim Empire. The first attack occurred in the Iliac Bay region, which separates High Rock and Hammerfell. I know where Hammerfell is, that's where the Red Guard are from. Kintira's entourage was massacred and the Empress taken capture. For 2 years, Kintira II languished in an imperial prison to believe somewhere in Glenpoint or Glenmoril before she was slain in a cell under mysterious circumstances. The second attack was on a series of imperial garrisons along the coastal Morrowind Islands. The Empress consort, Kontin Ardvix, fell defending the forts. The third and final attack was a siege of the imperial city itself, occurring after the Elder Council had split up the army to attack the western High Rock and eastern Morrowind. The weakened government had little defense against Uriel's determined aggression, and capitulated after only a fortnight of resistance. Uriel took the throne that same evening and proclaimed himself Uriel III, Emperor of Tamriel. The year was 3rd Era 121. Thus began the War of the Red Diamond, described in Volume 2 of this series. Am I hidden? Oh, well, how long were we reading for? Okay. We're gonna do some more story time soon, but I think it's high time that we get on with our test. I think T is wait. So yeah, we're gonna go into the city walls, and then, unless the door's not open, and then afterwards we'll go and have a talk with the Jarl, tell him about the dragons, and maybe pick up a few side quests. I feel bad for that lady that I stole her books, but they were so enthralling I just couldn't help it. You know, Khajiit don't really have a sense of property rights. The only property rights they have is, that's my property. The only property rights Khajiit understand is, I have the right to your property. From what I understand, the reason why that person was so, like, mean to at the start, was so upset about elves and cats, was because of the Thalmor. It's been explained to me that the Thalmor tricked the Khajiit who worship the moons, by, I don't know, they manipulated the cycles of the moons or something to basically kind of Bene Gesserit the Khajiit into supporting them. Something like that. But we're trying to get the entrance of this place. Such a pretty game. Okay, I think we're close to the entrance now. I'm getting a little hungry, so I think what we'll do is...
Halt! City's closed with the dragons about. Official business only. Fine. But we'll be keeping an eye on you.
I'm getting a little hungry, guys.
We'll pay whatever it takes, but we must have more swords for the Imperial soldiers.
I'm just thinking of what I might be doing is I'm gonna break into people's houses and then read their stories, and that might be just a part of the series. Story time with Korha, breaking into people's houses and reading their stories. What I'll do is I will make my way up to the temple.
Wait, I know you. Wait, I know you. There's no mistake. You're a wanted woman, and it's time to pay for your crimes. Good enough. I'll just confiscate any stolen goods you're carrying, then you're free to go. All right then.
Say Helgen got hit by a dragon. First comes here.
I'm a wanted woman. I've always wanted to be wanted. Alright, I'm gonna save, I'm gonna eat, I'm a little hungry. How do I go to the actual system? Save. New save. I'm a little hungry, guys, so I'm going to stop recording.